Hello and welcome to today's English lesson. My name is Lamitan Felix, and in today's lesson I'll introduce you to literature. This lesson is suitable for learners in grade 7, 8 and 9 of the junior secondary schools in Kenya, and that is following the Kenyan competence-based education. So welcome aboard. The term literature refers to the body of all creative works of a nation, and that entails both written and spoken literature. And so literature can be categorized into two. We have written literature, which is sometimes referred to as just literature, and oral literature, which is otherwise called orature, oral performance, or oral art. So underwritten literature, which I have told you is sometimes called literature, we have fiction and non-fiction. Fiction material are imaginative works of literature such as novels, page poetry, and that refers to poetry that is meant to be read. You have novellas, short stories, amongst others. Non-fiction refers to the kind of literature that is based on facts rather than imaginations, as in the case with fiction materials. Non-fictions are based on facts, truth. They are not imagined. And examples under this category include textbooks used in schools, biographies, autobiographies, reference materials such as dictionaries, atlases, thesauruses, which is a book that entails the synonyms and antonyms of words, encyclopedia, memoirs, and others. So the difference between fictional material and non-fictional material is that fictional works are based on imaginations, while non-fictional materials are based on truth or facts that can be proven or that have been researched and arrived at by comparison of available factual materials that have been worked on before or arrived at upon detailed research. So that is the difference between fictional material and non-fictional material. On the other side is oral literature, which is based on spoken word, transmitted from one generation to another by spoken word. And here we have oral narratives like tricksters, fables, and ethological tales. Then we also have short forms like puns, riddles, tongue twisters, and proverbs. These are called short forms because they are brief and to the point. Then you also have theatrical works and oral poetry, that is, songs meant to be sung on particular occasions like weddings, funerals, or even harvests. So those are called oral poems. They are meant to be sung rather than read like page poetry. And that is the difference. So you should know that we have two forms of literature. We have written literature, which is sometimes called literature, and then we have oral literature, which is otherwise referred to as orature or oral art or performed art. So having looked at that, I have a short quiz for you that I'm going to write here and give you some time to answer before I give you my answers. So here we go. Categorize the following literature materials as either oral or written: short stories, riddles, memoirs, thesauruses, trickster narratives, wedding songs, autobiography, eulogy, page poetry, and puns. So 5 seconds to go through that, and then we answer together. Right, so you can check with me. Short stories are written literature. Riddles are oral literature. Memoirs are written literature. Thesauruses fall under written literature. Trickster narratives fall under oral literature. Wedding song, oral literature. Autobiography, written literature. Eulogy, oral literature. Page poetry falls under written literature. And finally, puns fall under oral literature. So there it is. If you scored 10 out of 10, kudos. You're doing great. So up from here, I'd like us to talk about oral literature, which is a form of literature on its own. And the phrase or the term oral literature refers to an artistic form of expression delivered by word of mouth across generations. So that is what oral literature is. And so we have certain features that distinguish oral literature from written literature. And the first one is performance. Unlike written literature that is supposed to be read personally or to an audience, oral literature lives in performance. Consider a wedding song, for example. It needs to be performed before an audience. The performers dressed in costumes and dancing to a tune. You see? So oral literature lives in performance. Secondly, we have verbal delivery. Oral literature is delivered verbally by word of mouth rather than by writing. And that really distinguishes it from written literature because instead of appearing on a page, it appears on verbal articulation. It needs to be delivered orally. Oral literature depends on occasion. So occasion is another feature of oral literature. Oral literature pieces or materials are delivered during specific occasions. Can you just imagine it? Having a wedding song sung in a funeral ceremony, it doesn't make sense at all. It can really baffle the audience and leave them in stitches. So various oral literature materials need to be performed in various occasions or during various events. A wedding song, so to speak, needs to be performed in a wedding ceremony. A dirge or a funeral song requires performance during a funeral. So those are the salient features of oral literature. 3 features: performance, occasion, and verbal delivery. So think of them and have them at your fingertips. Next, I want us to talk about the importance of studying oral literature. Why is it important for students of English and other languages to study oral literature in school and back in the community during field works? So, oral literature, to begin with, is entertaining. The process of studying oral literature itself entertains these students, and that is quite important. You enjoy coming across different short forms, oral poetry, oral narratives, and theatrical works. You see, that is quite important. And then oral literature materials can also be used to instruct moral lessons. The various oral narratives that we have from different communities are used, by the way, to instruct specific moral lessons in the recipients of such oral narratives. For instance, legends can be used to teach about courage, loyalty, and adherence to rules. You see? Another importance of oral literature, or why we need to study oral literature, is to raise role models, to gain role models that we can copy or emulate. So when you study or when you learn about a particular legend or hero in the society that emerged valiant and was actually loyal to the cause of his career or achievements, then you might learn and try to emulate such a hero or heroine in the society. That is quite important. And then oral literature is also used to teach about the environment. Yes, taking care of the environment generally is taught and passed down from one generation to another using oral literature materials like oral narratives and tongue twisters, by the way. Another importance of studying oral literature is enhancing language skills, and that can be found straightforward in puns, tongue twisters, and proverbs. These short forms and many other forms of literature help learners enhance their language capabilities and their abilities to communicate effectively and pronounce words correctly. Oral literature is also used to enhance creativity, because as the student learns and comes across various oral literature material, their imaginative ability is expanded and they are capable of imagining widely and wildly and coming up with stories or even different oral literature materials on their own. So it expands the learner's creative capacity or ability. Oral literature also enhances our learning of our own history. We are capable of learning our origins and our movement from one stage to another across generations and the development of the human race. In the process of studying oral literature materials, students are capable of learning the cultures of various societies and communities, not just the ones that they come from, but even others in different places across the world. These are the importance of studying oral literature in schools and in the society for a learner. If you are asked to mention any importance, then there you go, and I hope you have it captured at your fingertips. Up from here, I'd like us to talk about the various genres of oral literature. And the term genre refers to form or category. So we have different forms of oral literature, and they include oral narratives. We have oral poems, otherwise called songs. And you also have short forms. And under this category, we have riddles, tongue twisters, puns, and proverbs. They are called short forms because they are concise and to the point. Then we also have theatrical works, such as movies and plays that have been performed before an audience or that have been filmed and processed. So we have 4, and we have them here, as you can see. So I'll start with oral narratives. And oral narratives are traditional stories passed down generations by word of mouth. Let's look at the features of oral narratives, and that is the things that distinguish oral narratives from other forms of oral literature. The first is fantasy. This refers to the creation of imaginary, supernatural, or factually impossible elements within a story. For example, making an animal talk that is imaginary and impossible. So if that is done in a story, that is what we call fantasy. It's a basic feature of oral narratives. And the importance of fantasy is that it makes a story interesting and memorable. As you listen to the story narrated to you, you enjoy, and then afterwards, you can still remember what was narrated to you. Secondly, we have personification, and personification refers to the giving of human traits or characteristics to non-human characters in a story. And characters, my listener, are the people or things involved in the conversations and actions of a literary work. So the giving of human qualities to non-human characters in a story, such as the ability to talk, to think, to have intentions, and to process complex ideas, is what we call personification. The importance of personification includes the following. It makes a story interesting and actually easy to pass down one generation to another. And then again, it is used to enhance relatability and empathy. It makes the listener or the audience capable of fitting themselves in the shoes of the non-human character and feeling what they would have felt or feeling what they feel. So that is what personification does to a listener or an audience. And then thirdly, personification is used to simplify complex ideas and processes. If you want to explain something that is quite difficult to explain, use personification to simplify that to a human level of understanding. So for example, if you want to speak about the formation of a block mountain or a volcanic eruption, then you can personify the mountain and give it human actions and behaviors that will then make that process simple to understand to your listener. And then personification is also used to build the atmosphere or mood of a story. If you want to convey emotions of sadness, anger, or even boredom, then you personify them, and so it will be possible for your human listener to understand the atmosphere of your story or the mood that you're trying to convey at a human level. Personification is also used to instruct certain moral lessons to the listener or the audience whenever a story is being narrated, because from a human level of understanding, you're capable of capturing a specific lesson quite clearly as compared to if it were to be told from an animal's point of view. So you are capable of understanding the lesson that is being taught in that story because the characters have been personified. They have been made to behave or act like human beings. That is one of the importance of personification. Then lastly, personification also creates a more vivid imagery. The use of speaking characters and characters with intentions and abilities to act like human beings makes the imagery of your story more visible to your listener or your audience. They can actually see and come to terms with the pictures created in their mind as they listen to the story being narrated to them. That is quite important. So I've spoken about fantasy and personification. Thirdly, we also have the opening formula. And the opening formula introduces a story. And these are phrases like once upon a time, there once was, there once lived long time ago. These phrases are called opening formula. And the importance of the opening formula is that it alerts the audience that the story is starting. It marks the beginning of a story. And then it also identifies the narrator. Because if we had a group of people sitting together and someone stands and says, once upon a time, then you come to terms with the fact that that is actually the narrator of that story that is yet to be narrated. so it identifies the narrator. It also transports the audience from the world of reality to the world of fantasy, where things are imaginary and factually impossible. That transportation is done by using the opening formula. And then it also introduces what we call timelessness. It puts a story in an unspecified time in the past. Then the opening formula also builds the audience appetite or anticipation for the story. It makes them have the appetite to enjoy the story as it flows out and as it is narrated to them. It builds the audience appetite. Another feature of oral narratives is the closing formula. A narrator can choose to end a story with a question, and that acts as their closing formula, seeking the audience to participate or eliciting some reactions among the audience. You see? So you can have phrases like, "There ends my story," and "they lived happily ever after," and so many others. And the importance of the closing formula, my learner, is that it marks the end of a story by alerting the audience that the story has come to an end. It transports the audience from the world of fantasy, that is, that imaginary world, back to the world of reality. And then it also releases the audience concentration. It makes them stop concentrating in the story because the story has come to an end. It releases their focus from the story. And then also it builds the audience appetite for the next story, because once they know that the story has come to an end, they will be longing for another story to start. So it builds their appetite for the next story. And then also it invites the audience to participate into the story by commenting, asking questions, or even just mentioning some of the things that have happened in the story that have impacted their lives or changed their views of life in a particular way. So those are the importance of the closing formula. Then another feature of oral narratives is what we call moral lessons. Oral narratives are meant to teach specific moral lessons in the society where they are told. Issues like courage, charisma, loyalty, honesty are taught using oral narratives. And when you are told to identify the moral lesson of a particular oral narrative, then state it in the positive. Avoid using the word not or never. Just state your lesson in the positive. What should be done instead of what should not be done. You can use a proverb to summarize the lesson of a story, but it has to be one that actually captures the theme of your story. You see? Yes, so you don't just mention anything, and it has to go in line with what happened in the story. And when you're explaining your moral lesson, then you need to state what a character does in line with that moral lesson that led to their suffering or success. That is how you explain your moral lesson. You see? Yes, so that's what we have. Another feature of oral narratives is what we call timelessness. And this refers to the placing of a story in an unspecified time in the past. And this is usually achieved by the opening formula. It places the story in a time that is not identified in the story, an indefinite past. And that is quite important because it avoids direct reference You want to teach people, and you don't just want them to focus on the time and specific place when the event occurred, because some of them might feel offended in the long run. So to avoid offending your audience and referring specifically to a given time or place in the past when that particular story occurred, you as the narrator could choose to place your story in an identified past, that is in relation to time and place. That is now what we call timelessness. So these are the features of oral narratives, and you should know them because you can be asked to identify some of the features of oral narratives present in a particular story that is in your paper too. I've spoken about fantasy, personification, opening and closing formulas, timelessness, moral lesson. So know them. So up from here, I have some questions for you to test your ability and to know whether you have understood what I have taught you so far. And I am going to make myself invisible so you can read along with me and answer the questions as best as you can. So here we go. Read the following oral narrative and answer the questions that follow. Once upon a time, animals lived happily with man in the same forest. They ate the same herbs and fruits, except the fruits of one tree, which the sky god had forbidden them to even touch. Man grew wise and authoritative and began exercising control over all the other animals. The animals, feeling berated, convened and plotted evil against man. They would entangle him with the sky god. So they sent Snake, the most beguiling of them all, to trick him. The snake went out and met man's wife fetching fruits in the forest and said, "Hello there, I know you must be hungry. Have you thought about the sweet and satisfying fruits of the tree here? Look at how tasty and juicy they appear to be." "God warned us not to eat it lest we die," protested the woman. "That's a lie. He only knows you will be satisfied and become wiser, knowing all things. Isn't that what you want?" Eve nodded and, falling for the lie, took some of the fruits and ate, and gave some to the man too. The sky god was furious upon learning of their rebellion. He sent the man and his wife out of the forest, creating a lasting rift between them and the other animals in the forest. And there ends my story. Question 1. Explain any two features of oral narratives present in the story. I'm going to give you some time to think about that. Good, so here we go. Some of the features of oral narratives present in the story include personification. The snake has been given the ability to talk like a human being, and other animals have been given the ability to have intentions and to plot against man. These are human qualities that have been given to non-human characters, and so the feature personification is present in the story. Another feature present in the story is what we call fantasy, the creation of factually impossible elements or imaginative elements in a story, and so giving animals the ability to talk. The snake being given the ability to talk is an element of fantasy because that is factually impossible. So that is fantasy, and that is how you can explain it. Then we also have the opening formula, and our opening formula is once upon a time. So you just state opening formula and you give the opening formula thereafter. And then you also have the closing formula, and our closing formula here is and there ends my story. That is also another feature. And then you also have timelessness. There is no specific time when the events in the story occurred. So the story has been placed in unspecified time in the past. That is what we call timelessness. So those are some of the features of oral narratives present in the story. Another question: mention 4 characters present in the story. Some time to think. So some of the characters mentioned in our story here are the snake, the animals, the sky god, the man, and the man's wife. Characters, my learner, as I have told you before, are the people and things that take place in the conversations and actions of a literary work. Could be an oral narrative or even a poem. So the people and the things that take place in the actions and conversations of a literary work are what we call characters. The next question: what is the giving of human qualities to non-human characters in a story called? Time to think. Alright, that is what we call personification. Another question: state one importance of the quality described in 3A above. Time to think. Right. Importance of personification: makes a story interesting and easy to narrate across generations. Used to simplify complex ideas and processes. Used to create the mood or atmosphere of a story. Used to teach certain moral lessons at a human level of understanding. Used to create a more vivid imagery. So those are the importance of personification, and you should know them by now. So with all that, I have come to the end of this lesson. Subscribe and share this video, and if you want to learn more about the other things studied in oral literature, I have created a book that is available on my website, and you can check the link in the description to find that book, retailing at just a few dollars, and you will have all the lessons that we are studying here in one book that you can go over several times. The book is furnished with questions along with answers that can help you enhance your understanding and test your abilities. So find it right in the description box. Thank you for taking your time to listen, and have a beautiful day. Bye.